crazy thing about it is it's not just SaaS with a flywheel of subscriptions, but when you build an ESP like that, you get expansion revenue, which turns into net negative churn. We don't have to go too deep into that, but that is the holy grail essentially of building a SaaS company, is that you can add 0 customers this month and your revenue goes up. It's just mind blowing once you see it.
Hello and welcome to Confessions of a B2B Entrepreneur. And today we have a legend in the game. We have Rob Walling of TinySeed, MicroConf, Startups for the Rest of Us, and previously Drip. Now, Rob is an OG in the B2B SaaS bootstrapping game, built and sold Drip from first line of code to selling of 3.5 years. He owned the majority. He then took his podcast and events business, has grown them, written a load of books, and then built TinySeed, which is a kind of VC fund kind of incubator for bootstrapped SaaS companies. So he's essentially been in the game for maybe nearly 20 years. And we have a wide-ranging chat about how he's done that and the journey that he's taken on. I really enjoyed this. Shout out to Rob. Let's jump into that discussion right now. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Tom. It's great to be here.
I want to break down this discussion into 2 areas. First, Drip and the building of this company, and which I was definitely aware of back when you started building it. I was like in the space. And so I always respected the branding. Not sure if that was you.
It was a friend of mine as I was coming up with the idea, or maybe, I don't remember if we even had any code written, and I was hanging out. Our kids are playing at a playground and I'm not good at branding in general. And he just came up, he's like, I think you should call it Drip. I was like, what? I had all these different names. I was like, ooh, like Velvet Mail and Courier. And I was just going through, as you do, just running through names. Drip I was like, 4 letters? That nailed it. We're naming the generic, right? Because Drip emails were a thing, but then Drip became that. Yeah, I like to feel like I get lucky sometimes. And the harder I work, the more luck I create. And that was a very lucky moment.
That was one. So first up, Drip, and then the second half into your more recent work, the conference, the not VC fund, well, the type kind of VC fund incubator, and also how you've used media, which I find quite interesting. So let's kick off with Drip. Around 2012, I think you started it. Why choose email marketing?
Well, I like to build tools where I see a pretty desperate pain point or a need. And I had a need to do better email marketing with my own, because I had prior SaaS companies and prior just one-time downloadable software businesses. And there was no email tool that did what I needed to do. So it didn't just solve my own problem. I actually did go out and I got like 10 people, to founders, to say, yeah, I would try that if you built it. But originally it wasn't going to be a full-blown ESP. It was an email service provider, right? That marketing automation that wound up competing with like MailChimp and HubSpot to a certain extent, and Infusionsoft back in the day. I guess they're called Keep.
Infusionsoft, yeah.
Yeah, remember that? Ooh, that's a throwback. But originally it was just a little email capture widget that did email sequences, and that's all it did. And I was like, oh, I'm going to build a little lifestyle business tool that's going to do 30, 40 grand a month. And then I got into it. We got about 8 months in, and people were like, there's a real gap in the market for marketing automation. It was coming down from these $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month tools that people wanted to pay a few hundred a month, but there were no tools that did it very well. And so that became that market opportunity that I only knew once we took a step into it. I didn't know any of that. I didn't even know what marketing automation meant. I didn't know what that term meant when we started Drip. And that's what the tool became it was market pull.
Yeah. And presumably also inspired ConvertKit, I guess, because you were before them.
We were before. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think we inspired several tools. We had a lot of competitors in the early days that kind of sprang up. ConvertKit was one of several. ConvertKit's the only one that's still in business.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so we had that, and because you're technical, right? So you actually built the first product.
I didn't. I am a developer, or was a developer, but I was smart enough to know that I did not want to be coding on my own product anymore. I had either built, or at least I built everything prior to that. Some of them I acquired and tweaked, but I was always in the code. And with this one, I was like, for once, I'm going to just be the founder. I'm just going to be the entrepreneur. And so I hired a contractor to build it, who later became a W-2 employee, who later became retroactively my minority co-founder in the business. That's Derek, yeah.
Very nice.
So he wrote every line of code for the first year or so.
And it was largely, I believe, bootstrap / self-funded.
Completely. Yeah, we didn't raise any funding.
Completely.
And it was self-funded out of my other businesses, right? So I worked a day job for years as a developer. And then either built or acquired these small little software niche products, niche tools, and eventually built up an income of about $150,000 a year, which you can live in California with a house, and I had 2 kids and a wife. And then I like bought the next one, and then I built the next one. And so by the time I got to Drip, I had about, over the course of probably 15 months it took to build, launch, and get to profitability. I think I put in about $150,000, $175,000 from other businesses. So someone might be listening to this and be like, "Oh, you must be rich." It's like, nope, I wasn't until I built a bunch of companies. You know what I mean? Like, I was a guy working a day job, making $100,000 a year or whatever as a developer. Slowly built that snowball, or as I call it now, I stair-stepped my way up such that I could be my own angel investor.
Yeah. So you mentioned luck, right? But you've been practicing for years, both coding, but also being an entrepreneur. That also gave you some of the cash that enabled you to fully bootstrap. And it was from starting to selling, I believe. Did you sell the whole thing? And it was around 5 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, starting to selling it did. So we did sell the whole thing. And from the first line of code until we sold was 3.5 years. Pretty crazy. From launch until sales, 2.5. It tells you that this space was hot. The space was hot. A lot of people wanted to get in, this space being email service provider. And the crazy thing about it is it's not just SaaS with a flywheel of subscriptions, but when you build an ESP like that, you get expansion revenue, which turns into net negative churn. We don't have to go too deep into that, but that is the holy grail essentially of building a SaaS company, is that you can add 0 customers this month and your revenue goes up. It's just mind blowing once you see it. And the first time I saw it, I was like, wait, what happened? Like, I was looking at the numbers and I was like, I've heard of this concept, but so about 9 months out of 12, Drip had net negative churn. Even if it was only 1 or 2%, it's crazy.
So good, because I also like retention as well, because it's hard to rip these things out, especially because you go in and build all these automations in the tool, right? It's like Zapier.
Yeah.
People are not, like, it's just such a heavy lift.
That's right.
And I assume we'll talk about this later, but there's probably a criteria of SaaS companies that you guys like to invest in.
Sometimes, see, not every business can do it. We do invest in businesses that don't have net negative churn, and we certainly we invest in businesses that have low switching costs. And some of those are successful for other reasons. If you're going to do that, you need a really wide market and you need cheap marketing and blah, blah, blah. There's other factors that have to be in place. But yeah, in a perfect world, like, I have a video I recorded for my course. The course is called the SaaS Launchpad. And one of the videos is, I think it's called like 18 components of a perfect SaaS business. And that's one, like, net negative churn is one of them. And in fact, no business I know has all 18 of them. But I was just coming up with all the things, that I could think of.
That you want. And then how did the deal come about to sell? And why did you choose to sell at that time?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I didn't plan to sell. It wasn't even really on my radar. But I'll tell you what was happening was we had built it up. We were doing 7 figures, and I don't remember exactly if it was $1 million or $1.5 million. And we had, I don't know, maybe 8 of us on the team, fully bootstrapped. But I was very, very cash strapped. Like, I needed more money. We could have grown faster. I could have hired ahead. There's so much stuff I couldn't do because of money. So I was thinking about trying to raise a small funding round, like $500,000, but I didn't want to raise venture. I would have tried to raise it in the most bootstrapper friendly way possible. Well, this was like 2014, 15. There were no funds that did that. There were no angel investors I knew that would do that. Like, the landscape was different. So I was thinking about this for months and months and months and months, and nothing, and talking to people, and they're like, yeah, we don't know. You got to take venture capital. And I'm like, I don't want to go that route. So during that time, we started really picking up steam in the brand. Our brand became pretty strong. And so we started getting inbound interest to acquire us. We got dozens and dozens of investor, like VC pitches, right? Of junior folks reaching out saying, do you need funding? And then we got maybe 10 people reaching out wanting to acquire us, of which 5 seemed serious. And so I started just evaluating those and saying, like, do we take money off the table, or do we put money back? Do we raise money and then sign up for another 3 to 5 years, in essence, of doing this, or 3 to 10 years, frankly, depending on how it pans out? And so I guess the reason I decided to sell is eventually an offer came through that was enough money that I could, based on my ownership, I had majority ownership, but not 100%, right? I didn't have to work anymore. Like, that was the moment where I was like, wow, it's crazy to see a number on a piece of paper that someone sends you or an email. and be like, that would be in my bank account and I would be set for life. And it's a really weird thing. I grew up just above poor, working class. Like I had a construction, my dad was a construction worker. My mom didn't work. And so to think like that is kind of something I had wanted for most of my life. I didn't want to be rich to be rich. I wanted to be rich for the freedom so that I could work on whatever I wanted for the rest of my life, which is what I've done now for the last 9 years.
Epic. And you don't have to say the exact number, but was it a multiple of revenue that they offered?
Yeah, cool. It was. And this is back when multiples were, I'll say they were lower. Like there wasn't the private equity froth. I think we closed the deal. Well, we closed it in 2016. And it was the subsequent years that multiples went way up. But I'll tell you what, it was an above market multiple for the time. And that multiple is probably about where stuff sells today. But in between, there was that big, that 2020 and 2021, things were selling from, you saw 10x, 15x ARR multiples. It was crazy.
The glory days, 2021.
The glory days, oh yeah.
Okay, so we sell Drip. And then what happens like immediately after when the money lands? What happens in like the following days or weeks?
Do you mean for me personally, kind of how it hit me rather than the business? Yeah. I remember the day the money hit and refreshing the bank balance and having this huge sigh of relief of like, whoa, an existential sigh of relief is how I think about it, to where I was like, I think I've worked my whole life for this moment. Like that's how profound it was of like, and again, I didn't go out and buy a sports car. I didn't go buy a house. I just thought that right there is safety. Like that is infinite safety, because everything I'd been doing, right? I had worked a day job and then I had done nights and weekends and I'd started these businesses and I was living off my own 150 grand a year. But I always felt this existential dread of what happens when Google decides to delist this thing or it gets penalized or a competitor comes along or this, and everything was always existential dread. And then my SaaS app right before Drip relied on, like, it was an SEO keyword tool. So it intertwined with Google and had to scrape things. And I was always like, this is not a 10-year business. Like, this is great. The business before it was doing was it doing 300 grand a year? It was somewhere in there, $350,000 a year. It was just me, right? It was like total indie hacker dream. I was making more money than I had ever seen. But I was always like, yeah, but next year, it might not make that. And even with Drip, it was like, ooh, this great business. But then we had Russian spammers one night, like start sending spam and all of our IPs got blacklisted. And this is maybe when we were doing 500 grand a year, 300 grand a year, whatever. It was still a good business. And I was like, well, we had a good run. This might literally be the end of the business. And so it was always existential for me. Like, I had no backstop, right? I didn't have rich parents. I couldn't go to them and say, hey, I missed my house payment. Like, I had to make it work. And so that, I think, was the biggest thing for me, was the exhale over the course of weeks of like, okay, I don't have to be in fight or flight anymore. Frankly, any type of exit, and especially one of that magnitude, is very stressful, especially towards the end. So I had to kind of unclench my entire being. That took more than weeks. That took months, if not like a year, to kind of unclench and just relax and be like, cool, you're good now. Now let's look to the future.
I think you already had the podcast before you sold Drip, right?
Yeah, sold Drip in 2016. Podcast started in 2010. So I was 6 years in. So it really did follow the whole arc if you go back. I mean, I couldn't talk about everything, like acquisition, until it happened. But along the way, I was like, you can go back and hear me. I'm launching a new email thing. I sound so young. Oh, you little spring chicken, you naive little puppy. That's how I think about myself now. Like, if only I knew what I was getting into.
So you kind of nailed the timing on, you might be actually even been too early on two things: A, podcasting, and B, bootstrapping.
Yeah, I think so.
But now those two things are like, or in the last 5 years at least, those two things are very on trend. Okay, cool. So we have the podcast. Did we have the conference? When did the conference start?
Yeah, it started in 2011. That was our first event.
Oh, so both.
I was doing this all on the side.
Drip.
It was nights and weekends, man. It was crazy. Like, the podcast and MicroConf were a hobby. I mean, we made a little bit of money from them, but it was something I had a co-host at the time, something we were doing because we really loved it. And I had written a book too. Start Small, Stay Small came out in 2010. The second book came out in 2016, Entrepreneur's Guide to Keeping Your Shit Together. And those were the things that I was like, I've made the most money in my life selling software companies. That is the number one driver. Number two happens to be crypto, not because I'm a crypto bro, but because I invested some of the money after Drip in 2016.
Nice.
I was like, I'm going to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and a bunch, $60,000, $70,000 worth of Bitcoin and Ether at the time. And it's like, well, if it goes to zero, it does. And that, of course, became $1 cajillion. But those are the number one and two. But I have really enjoyed, while I was building software companies, I really enjoyed talking about building software companies, right? Which is what the books, the conference, and the podcast were.
Exactly. Which gets me onto my media point, because right now it seems like those things must be really helping your ability to put money into other great
They are
software companies, right?
100%.
And so they could, and I want to dig into how and why, but the media could then therefore lead to you making more money than crypto and through selling your own software companies through the fund, right?
Possibly. Yeah.
Possibly. It could
That's
happen.
the bet. Yeah.
And so let's rewind then 2011 when you started the pod and the conference. Is it just that you just love talking about this stuff? So that's why you started it? Or was it strategic or more strategic?
It was not strategic. I had a blog that I started in 2005. That's now at robwalling.com. Yeah, talk about being early to everything. I don't know why I did this stuff. I just did this stuff. I did this stuff because I was bored with the other stuff. I was bored with my day job. So I started a blog just talking about software engineering and working a day job and bullshit like that. And then in 2006, I started having my first success as an entrepreneur. And it was like a little product that did a couple $1,000s a month. And so I just started writing about that of like, hey, this is what I've done. I'm an engineer who's learning marketing. That was the blog, really. And then that became the first book, Start Small, Stay Small. It's like an engineer's guide to how to market a product or a startup online. And what I realized after a while was, as a writer, I honed my craft to communicate, but I was a commodity. People would read me. Remember like Google RSS reader, all the RSS readers? I was just one article you scrolled through. I was like a TikTok. Do you know, I'm not on TikTok, but like if you're on there, do you know the names of like any TikTok creators, or do you just see the sea of commoditized stuff, right? That's what I had become. And so I realized as a writer, unless I was going to write books, people were just, they couldn't even tell me apart from the other bloggers who were blogging about the same thing, right? So there was me, Patrick McKenzie, and Peldi Gilzoni from Balsamic. Those were the three that were writing about this. And there were a few other people that were doing stuff. So I started saying like, I started listening to a podcast. Do you remember? So Joel Spolsky and Jeff Atwood launched Stack Overflow, and they started a podcast to talk about that. And like, they probably started in 08 or 09. And once I heard their voices in my earbuds, I realized, wow, I can know them a lot better. And I read all their writing. Like, this is the next level of engagement. And so that was a big reason, was I want to not just be, can you imagine if I blogged this whole time? It'd be fine. But the return on that is not what I wanted. And so the podcast was kind of a way to me, it was the next thing that was happening. It was the next wave. And we were too early. I mean, we recorded, it was me and a co-host. I had a co-host for the first 450 episodes. And then the last 300, I've been on my own. But we recorded 52 episodes a year. And I believe after the first year, we had 600 listeners. And I don't know how it is today to get started, but I remember, and I had 25,000 blog readers at the time, blog subscribers. So to me, 600 was nothing. And I remember thinking, is this a good use of our time? Like, is this good? Should I be doing something better? But we showed up every week, and it's a little bit like the Seinfeld thing. We never missed a week. And so I've never missed a week in 15 years. And I can't bring myself to lose that streak. That's really why I've kept doing it. But also, some people say, why do you keep doing it? We turned it into a business very quickly. We launched the conference in 2011, and that all came out. Yep. And then we realized, well, the conference, in order to sell tickets, and we had a little online community at the time too, we needed the podcast as marketing. And so that was the other thing, I think in a good way, that kept me doing it. Because most developer podcasts, software entrepreneur podcasts, they come for a few years, and then eventually something else more important comes up, usually making money, if I'm being honest. So the fact that we did monetize it, I think, was a good thing. It kept us doing it kept me doing it now for 15 years.
And then there was, between the start of the podcast and the conference, before TinySeed was introduced, 2018, around that?
TinySeed 18, yep.
Yeah. So that's 7 years where you were basically building up the audience to ultimately sell them something, which was trying to sell your money, right?
Yeah, which I had no idea I was going to do until, TinySeed, I announced it in October of 2018. And really, I had an idea for it. I had this notebook from like 2011, 2012, where I say, why is there no YC for bootstrappers? And I wrote this big list of things, and eventually I said, this could exist, I think, but I don't want to do it because I don't want to raise funding, and I don't want to deal with the financial side of it. There's a lot to raise a venture fund. It's very complex, a lot of legal. And so it wasn't until I met my co-founder in spring of 2018 that he was like, hey, you should start a fund to invest in bootstrappers. And I was like, yeah, someone should do that, but not me. It was that kind of thing. So it was not pre-planned, but certainly it's a moat. And I can't imagine launching TinySeed, which is a startup accelerator and a venture fund that invests in bootstrappers, in case people don't know. I can't imagine trying to do that without some type of reach, which is what I had from the podcast, my email lists, MicroConf, the event, as well as books. I've written 5 books, and those also they're just all part of an ecosystem.
And so your co-founder in TinySeed did the finance, and then you bought the community.
Pretty much, yeah. He raised, of course we would say we both did XYZ, we're co-founders, but basically he did 600 sales demos to close 42 million in funding across 3 funds. Now, all of that was inbound, right? He didn't have to go out and do a bunch of cold outreach because I was able to announce to my email list and the YouTube. So it not only helped find founders who want to be funded, but it helped us find investors who are mostly either former B2B SaaS founders or current ones who realize the power and the leverage of B2B SaaS. And they want a way to invest in, we've invested in almost 200 of them, right? So it's a way to kind of index across a bunch of early stage SaaS companies in a way that I don't think there's another instrument like that in the world, right? There's no public stock that does this, right? And I don't know any other venture fund that is so focused on early stage B2B SaaS like we are.
And is the potential return profile for the investor and for you slightly different from a typical VC fund? Because just, maybe I'm wrong here, but we're less likely to get the 10,000x return because we're not building like satellites.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So like a lower failure rate, presumably, as well.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, and I think if you look at, if we go to tinyseed.com/invest, I believe we talk about, the headline is venture returns with less than venture risk. TinySeed applies a growth equity approach to very early stage B2B SaaS, targeting 3 to 5x returns and returning capital sooner. So venture investing is power law. It's all about, I need one 10,000x, and pretty much everything else either fails or kind of breaks even or does 2x, 3x, right? That's what they do. That's why they bet on Uber and Facebook and whatever other big company we could think of these days, Meta. Our failure rate is still incredibly low. We've been investing for 5 years, almost 6. And I believe, you can't quote exact, but I think it's like 95%, 96% of our companies are still in business. B2B SaaS has a low failure rate. In addition, it's incredibly valuable. So I have this TinySeed millionaire rate is this thing I've tweeted about, but 43% of all TinySeed companies that we've invested in that are no longer in operation. So this includes ones that sold and that failed. 43% of the founders of those companies now are millionaires. Some might say, as someone did on Twitter, wow, $1 million sure isn't what it used to be. And I said, you know what? I don't care. $1 million is still $1 million fucking dollars. You know what I mean? So I don't know if we'll maintain that. It's early. We've only had a failure rate or a close down rate of 6% or something, in terms of exits and stuff. So I don't want to claim like we're going to do that the whole time, but that is the kind of thing that we're seeing. And that was the bet originally that we made on TinySeed. And I'll be honest, I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know if anyone would invest money in us. I didn't know if anyone would take our money. And it turns out it works. Now, the next question is, well, does it actually provide amazing returns for us and for investors? And that remains to be seen. It just takes time, right? You and I both know SaaS takes a long time to build the flywheel.
So as it stands today, how do you split your time between conference, podcast, fund, and writing books and anything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. Podcast is an hour a week tops. It's just fast for me because I've done 756 episodes, right? So even if I'm doing a solo episode, I will sit down and put some bullets down and then just talk to a camera, and I can record it in about 30 minutes. Now, it's heavily edited. This is the key to me being that efficient is our editor. I've had the same editor for the last 10 years or so. So he's edited 400 or 500 episodes. So he knows how to edit me. And I'm not great in these solo episodes. If you've ever listened, it sounds like I'm just stream of consciousness amazing. I'm in fact starting and stopping and doing all types of stuff. So podcast is 1 hour a week. I still enjoy it. It's probably the favorite part of my job, if I'm being honest. I was doing it for free back when it wasn't part of my job, right? It was a hobby. And so it's that thing that I've kept on doing. MicroConf is more than a conference now, right? It's the in-person event, but it's like a digital products business. We have a course called the SaaS Launchpad. It's a video course. We have mastermind matching that we run 3 times a year where we match people up. This is all paid stuff. We have MicroConf Connect, which is a subscription. It's a community in Circle, right? So it's forums and it's videos and a call once a month and this and that. So MicroConf is a bunch of stuff, but yeah, at its core, it's MicroConf. It is 2 in-person events per year. I have a team that I have a head of product who runs it like a general manager. So I spend an hour a week kind of advising, like, hey, what's the direction? What's going on? Looking at budgets and stuff and talking about direction. And then I spend whatever time they ask me to, because I'm the face of it. And so they'll say, record a YouTube video, record a LinkedIn. We need you to approve this or do whatever. So it's a few hours a week. It's not a ton.
Must be pretty profitable business.
It is, yeah.
Because presumably no investors. And then was this just you or your co-founder of the podcast as well?
The co-founder on the podcast, we bought him out. So it's me and me and the TinySeed crew. The TinySeed owners own MicroConf as well. It's kind of all one.
Got it.
It's all one team at this point. So yes, it is a profitable business, yeah.
And presumably that's funneling the majority of companies that you invest in for TinySeed. Would you say that's a majority, or is it hard to track probably?
It's not that hard to track because we ask, how'd you hear about us? And so it is a minority, but here's the thing. What I know is that across robwalling.com and my Twitter and my books, so the books funnel into email lists or the books mention TinySeed and MicroConf. So between Rob Walling, that kind of, if you think of that as its own ecosystem, and I would include Startup to the Rest of Us more as me than MicroConf, right? They're affiliated, there's crossover, there's a Venn diagram, but so the Rob Walling ecosystem versus the MicroConf ecosystem, which is the events and the email lists and everything we've done there, and the YouTube, that's in MicroConf. And then TinySeed is its own ecosystem. TinySeed's email list is as big as Rob Walling's email list now, you know what I mean? Between those three, I believe it's like, and that's emails, social media, audience, everything we do across those three. I think it's about 75% of people who apply to TinySeed come from those three. And then the other 25% is kind of referrals from current TinySeed founders, people finding us on Google or some list or some article we've been mentioned in. So that's our moat, if I'm being honest. Like if you, Tom, were to try to compete with TinySeed today, you don't have that 75%. You could have the 25 feasibly. And I'll be honest, those 25%, the referrals are important, actually. It's the ones where people find us in Google and stuff. Those are usually not the highest quality. You know what I mean? It is the folks that come through. So to answer your original question of does MicroConf funnel the majority? It does not. I think maybe MicroConf funnels, if I were to guess, 20%, 30%, somewhere in there. And then Rob Walling's probably 25. And then TinySeed itself now has brand momentum and it's 20. So maybe it's split even 25, 25, 25. It's not exactly, but you get the idea.
And the 25% for MicroConf, you have negative customer acquisition cost on those because it's a profitable business.
I would guess so. It's so hard to track. Man, it is hard to track because I'm recording these YouTube videos and I'm putting out a podcast. And so we're spending, I mean, at our peak, we don't spend this anymore, but we were spending like $15,000 a month on media production of 4 YouTube videos. And they're highly produced. You go to microconf.com/YouTube and look at them. And it's like multiple editors, many hours to like produce one 15-minute video. And that doesn't include my time or the time of my producer. So we were cranking 15 grand a month in. We're much less than that now because we're only doing a YouTube video every other week. And overall, MicroConf is profitable, but to actually nail down customer acquisition costs and something like that, you can just say, well, all of our marketing spend is X and this is the total amount we brought in. So yeah, it's positive, but like, it's hard to actually know. Someone said, what would you pay for a YouTube subscriber? It's like, I don't know. I don't know what I would pay. And that's weird for me because I tend to be a left brain marketer and really like to see dollars. But in this audience-driven media businesses, it's a little trickier, I think.
Yeah. So in terms of your time, I don't know if we got through that. It was like a few hours a week on MicroConf, 1 hour a week on the podcast, and then it's the rest of the time on TinySeed, like with the assessing companies.
Oh yeah, TinySeed and books. Yeah, I do really enjoy writing books. I've written 5 of them, and I find that YouTube and the podcast the podcast is really fun. YouTube is sometimes fun, sometimes not for me. I am sometimes forced. It's like, you have to record a video about this topic. And I'm like, I don't really care about this. I'll do it. I know about that topic. I just don't care. Like I had to record one on SOC 2 compliance. And it's like, really? This is how I'm going to spend an hour recording? But it is what it is. Books are a grind to write, but they're just the long tail is like forever. I mean, I wrote Start Small, Stay Small. I published it in 2010. We're recording this in 25, so 15 years later. That book still sells, I don't know, 250 copies a month. And it's just, I self-publish all my books. So it's not even about the revenue. It's about 200 more people learn about me and put money into a Kindle version or an audio version or whatever. 15 years later, SaaS Playbook, which I published 18 months ago, sells 800 copies a month right now through Amazon and my own stuff. That the impact of books for me is, I don't know, man. It might be more than that. YouTube has we have 95,000 subscribers on YouTube. By far, I'd rather have SaaS Playbook selling 800 copies a month. So I do put a lot of time into it. It's tough. Like writing books is hard. I'm not going to downplay that, but I think it's obviously worth it, or I wouldn't have done it 5 times.
One thing that's striking me from this conversation is I think the power of compounding, because you really have been doing the same thing, obviously getting better and better at it for, 2005, you said you started building your own products.
It's a long time. Yeah, man, it's 20 years. You could do it faster. Other people do it faster. Sometimes I'm either a bit of a slow learner. I'll be honest. I'm either a slow learner or I just was too early. Some things just was hard to do in 2005, right?
Yeah, for sure. On the bootstrapping thing, the podcasting thing, 2010 is super, super early. But you've just been so consistent, creating media, building products for this just for this one persona, which is the bootstrapped founder. And now you just have this massive ecosystem that it sounds like it's a joy to work in, and it's also pretty profitable. Well, I'm assuming the fund is going to have some juicy returns, but then you also have the other stuff which is very profitable. So it's an awesome story, Rob. And thanks for coming on and sharing all the details.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure.
So I think there's 2 books that are relatively recent, SaaS Playbook, but also Exit Strategy, right?
Correct. Yep. That's SaaSPlaybook.com and ExitStrategyBook.com. And Exit Strategy, we ran a Kickstarter for a few months ago. We are fulfilling that here, I believe, in the next month. And so it'll be then on Amazon.
Awesome. We will link to them below. We'll obviously link to your Twitter. We'll link to MicroConf, TinySeed, and the podcast.
Appreciate it.
Anything else we should mention?
No, that's it.
Amazing. Rob, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, team, what do we think of that? I just have to add some extra context that Rob added after we stopped recording. I was mentioning about how he's been compounding at this with that same audience or that same content in the same niche for nearly maybe 20 years. But he also wanted to add that what he did also do well was that he followed the market. He mentioned with Drip in that there was this opportunity in the mid-range pricing for marketing automation, email service provider software. So he followed that. He also was writing about some stuff on his blog before that no one cared about. And so he tweaked that and focused on marketing for developers and then bootstrapping, etc. So that's the other key when you're spending a lot of time doing stuff, is to take feedback and then to iterate your approach. Shout out to Rob. We'll link to all the stuff below. Shout out to Fame for producing this show. If you want a podcast like this, go to fame.so, request a proposal. And of course, shout out to you. Thanks to you for listening.